Hello! Today we're going to talk about animations and events in Pygame. So an animation is when an object appears to be moving on the screen. So this is done by repeatedly drawing objects on the game surface at different locations inside of our game loop. So for example, if we repeatedly draw a 60 pixel by 60 pixel square at different locations, it starts like it looks like it's moving. If you have made any sort of cartoon flip book, it's kind of the same concept. So let's get started by going to File and New. Click Python file, and we're going to name this file animations.py. Animations.py. So now let's start by importing Pygame, initializing it, just declaring a few colors here: black, white, red, green, blue, yellow, orange, and pink, setting the display width and the display height, and then setting our game surface equal to Pygame display.setMode and display width, display height, just like we did the previous time. So this is our game loop here. So under the for loop that is responsible to take care of the events, let's go ahead and draw a rectangle. So pygame.draw.rect, and now we're going to draw on our game surface with the color red, starting from point 0, 0, and it's going to be 60 by 60 pixels. Now remember, what we have to do now is do pygame.display.update in order to update our current situation. So if you go ahead and run this, you can see that we just draw a single rectangle on the top left of the screen. So what we need to do now is we can copy this statement here, and we can just paste it 4 times in total, and we can change the starting x. So first of all we can do 0, then 3, then 6, and then 9. So if we go ahead and run this, you can see that it doesn't even move. So imagine how many statements of these you would need to paste one after the other in order to make this work. So another way we can do this is by using a loop. So let's go ahead and outside of our game loop, we can go ahead and create a new variable x and set it equal to 0. And what we can now do is say, okay, we're going to draw this starting from x, and then next time we can increment x plus equals 3. So then each time this runs, we actually make this go towards the right. So what this is going to do is it's going to draw multiple squares, one next to each other, on the first line of our window. So it's going to look something like this. And I don't know if you can see it, but it actually takes some time to fill it all. It doesn't actually all get drawn at the same time, because this actually takes a little bit of time. So in order to actually make this look more like an animation and not like drawing many shapes one next to each other, is you could do game surface dot fill and use the black color that we set up here. So what this is going to do is every time this runs, it's going to reset the color to black and erase our previous shape. So as you can see, it doesn't all happen together. So we don't just draw many rectangles one next to each other. We actually erase the previous one each time we make a new one. So now we have another problem. The problem is that this all happens very fast. So this doesn't really that isn't really what we need. We need something that just runs a little bit slower. So in order to do that, we have to introduce the frames per second concept. So each iteration of our game loop, you can call this a frame, and the duration of the frame is called the frame rate. So currently the frame rate is very fast, so we have to slow it down in order for this to be more visible. So Pygame provides us with a clock module, with time module, that includes a class called clock. So we can use this to control the frame rate. So let's go ahead and after pygame.init, we can initialize the clock. So clock equals pygame.time.clock. Perfect. So in order to actually set the frame rate now, we have to go here to our program, and we can do this after the update, and we can say clock.tick, and inside here we write how many frames per second we want to use. So 60 is an okay number. So now let's try to run this and see the difference. So as you can see, this looks more like a regular animation rather than a really fast one that we can't keep track of what's happening. Okay, so now the problem is that the square actually moves off the screen and never returns back to the original position. So in order to make it return, we can go ahead and say if x is greater or equal to 600, and remember 600 is our screen width. So what we want to happen now is x equals to 0 again. So if we run this, you can see that when the square reaches the end, it again moves back to here. Okay, so now what if we want the square to move towards the right, and then when it reaches the end, then go back towards the left? So in order to do that, we can say here, okay, let's create another variable here called xChange, which will be set to 3. And down here we can say if x less or equal to 0, we can make xChange equal to 3. Else, if x is greater or equal to 600, we can say xChange is equal to -3. So then we have to increment x by xChange instead of 3. And what this will do now is when we reach the end, we come back the same way we went forward. So when we reach greater than 600, we actually make xChange equals to -3. And when we reset back to 0, we actually make xChange equal to 3 again. So then we move forward. So now for the exercises, make the frame rate equal to 20, 40, and 100. Make the square move from top to bottom and restart it again from the top. Change the color of the square every time we restart it. And now the exercises that you have to do when the square switches direction are: the square goes past the edge when switching direction, so make sure that doesn't happen. Switch between two colors when switching the directions. And make the square move up and down instead of left and right. And also make sure it doesn't go past any of these edges. So now let's go ahead and show another example. So let's go ahead and also import random here. We will use that later. So now let's go back and let's delete x and xChange as well. We won't need those. Let's go inside of our game loop just before the update. And let's start a for loop. So for I in range 100. So pygame.draw.circle. We want to draw inside of our game surface with the color white, and we want to do it randomly. So let's do random.randInt. And let's pick a value between 10 and 590. And now let's pick another value for the y. So random.randInt 10 and 470. Great, and now 1. So remember how we can draw the circle. So we have to include the game surface, then the color, and then we have to use the starting x, the starting y, and the radius of the circle. So this is a circle that begins at a random point here and here, and is of radius 1. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So as you can see, we create many little circles inside of our game, and they are all randomly positioned, but they are all the same size. They all have a radius of 1. So we can call this kind of a blizzard effect. So now let's create a snowfall effect. So this is similar with the one that we just did, except now we have to make 100 circles. So first we're going to create a list of 100 random coordinates for these circles. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and delete this. So again, for I in range 100. So let's go ahead and create a new circles, and actually let's go ahead and make this outside of our main game loop. So in here, let's create the circles, which is going to be an empty array. So now for I in range 100, and now we can do circles.append, and now let's get the random.randint, and again between 10 and 590, and random.randint between 10 and 470. So this is going to create to fill this array here, the array of circles, with 100 random x and y values. Great. So now let's go to inside of our game loop, and right here let's start looping through these. So for x, y in circles. So now this is going to run one time for each element inside of the array that we created before. So x will be equal to xy 0, and then y is going to be equal to xy 1. So we're taking the first random coordinates for x and y, and let's go ahead and draw our pygame.draw.circle. So we're drawing on our game surface with the color white, and we're using x and y as starting values for the coordinates, and of course 1 as a radius. So now let's go ahead and run this, and you can see that we now have a static kind of image of snowballs or snowfall. So in order to make this look like snow is falling, we actually need to go under our drawing place and do xy1 plus equals 3. So this will increment the y coordinate by 3. And now we can say if xy1 is greater or equal to 480. So if the snowfall kind of hits the bottom, if the circle kind of reaches the end, we can say xy1, so the y value is equal to 0. So every time we reach the bottom, we again go back to the top. So if we run this, yes, you can probably see this kind of looks like snow is falling. So every time we hit the bottom here, we again get transferred to the top of the screen. So as exercises, what you have to do is just play around with the frame rate to see how you can make the snowfall be faster or slower. Try doing 50, 300 or 500 circles and see how that affects the whole animation, and then try to give different colors to the circles and see what happens and how it looks. So just kind of play around with some values here and see how that affects our animation. This is the basic of the animations. Make sure to practice, do all of the exercises and actually play around. Create your own animations maybe with other shapes and sizes, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.